Elizabeth is a princess whose life gets turned upside down during a royal banquet. Out of nowhere, her fiancé, Prince Friar, publicly announces that he's breaking off their engagement because he claims Elizabeth pushed his beloved Sylvie down the stairs. The accusation completely blindsides her because she never did anything of the sort. Unfortunately, Friar is far more interested in showing off than listening to the truth. As if humiliating her in front of everyone wasn't enough, he also orders her to be locked away in the dungeon. The saddest part is that Elizabeth had spent years doing everything she could to become the perfect future queen. She even took over the prince's duties while he skipped work to attend parties. Her maid constantly begged her to rest, but Elizabeth always stayed up late finishing reports because she believed she was helping both Friar and the kingdom. She even convinced herself she worked better without him around. But Elizabeth wasn't doing it for the prince alone. She genuinely cared about the kingdom's people. Alongside handling royal affairs, she secretly ran the successful Funnel Corporation, using its profits to create jobs and help the poor. The townspeople admired the company's mysterious owner, never realizing it was Elizabeth herself. She preferred staying anonymous because helping others mattered more to her than receiving praise. The next morning, Prince Friar finally drags himself into her office with another ridiculous request. He wants the Geico Group to gain access to the royal treasury. Elizabeth immediately refuses after discovering the company had been secretly skimming profits. Giving them access to the treasury would put the kingdom's finances at serious risk. Friar throws a tantrum because he wants to impress his new friends and orders Elizabeth to approve the request, reminding her she's just his fiancée. Elizabeth refuses to back down, knowing the law is on her side and protecting the kingdom is more important than protecting his ego. After he storms off, Elizabeth asks his knight, Robert, to keep an eye on the prince before someone manipulates him into making even worse decisions. She knows that one reckless choice could drag the entire kingdom into decline, and ordinary people would suffer the consequences. Later, Elizabeth finally finishes her work and prepares to enjoy a rare day off. She asks her maid, Michelle, to ready the carriage. But before she can leave, her father arrives with urgent news. The king and the chancellor must attend an emergency meeting about increasing monster activity, leaving Elizabeth to handle the kingdom's upcoming anniversary celebration on her own. Elizabeth quickly realizes the problem. The meeting takes place during the kingdom's anniversary celebration. She suggests canceling the event, but her father explains that's impossible because guests from distant lands are already on their way. Instead, the king has decided to leave the entire celebration in Elizabeth's hands. She is completely shocked and tries to refuse, but her father tells her the king trusts no one more than her. With that kind of confidence placed on her shoulders, saying no isn't really an option. So, she quietly accepts the responsibility, even though her relaxing day off disappears before it even begins. While preparing for the anniversary celebration, Michelle spots Prince Friar openly flirting with Sylvie. She's furious that he's cheating on Elizabeth, but Elizabeth doesn't mind since it's common for princes to have multiple partners. Her only concern is that Sylvie, who was recently adopted into a noble family, still lacks proper royal etiquette and could damage the kingdom's reputation. To prevent future problems, Elizabeth invites Sylvie for tea. She politely explains that if she wants to be with the prince, she must behave responsibly because her actions affect both the prince's reputation and the kingdom's image. Elizabeth also mentions the injury on Sylvie's leg, knowing she got it while secretly meeting another nobleman. Instead of exposing her, Elizabeth simply tells Sylvie to stop cheating on the prince, since she has no interest in their messy relationship and only wants to protect the kingdom. Sylvie apologizes, but the moment she leaves, her innocent act disappears. Furious that Elizabeth uncovered her secret, she spots Prince Friar, bursts into fake tears, pretends to fall, and falsely accuses Elizabeth of attacking her. Back at the banquet, Elizabeth denies the accusation and reminds Friar that causing a scene in front of foreign guests will only disgrace the royal family. But the prince refuses to listen, declares Elizabeth guilty of trying to murder Sylvie, and orders her to be thrown into the dungeon. Neither Elizabeth nor the guards understand what is happening, but Robert, the prince's loyal knight, has no choice but to obey his master's orders. As Elizabeth is forced to the ground, she catches Sylvie wearing a smug little smile. At that moment, everything clicks. She realizes Sylvie planned this from the very beginning and successfully framed her. Almost everyone watching can tell the accusation is complete nonsense. But with the king and Elizabeth's father away, Prince Friar holds the highest authority in the castle. No one dares challenge his command, so Elizabeth quietly accepts her fate and walks to the dungeon without resisting. When news finally reaches the king, he is completely stunned. He can't believe his own son threw the kingdom's most capable woman into prison over such a ridiculous accusation. His first instinct is to rush back and set Elizabeth free while giving Friar the scolding of a lifetime. But then Elizabeth's father does something far more disappointing. Instead of standing up for his daughter, he convinces the king not to return, saying there is no need to waste time over the situation. In other words, he leaves Elizabeth to deal with the mess all by herself. Trusting his judgment, the king reluctantly agrees. A whole month passes with Elizabeth locked inside the dungeon. At first, she thinks prison might finally give her a chance to relax. Unfortunately, Prince Friar somehow finds a way to ruin even that. Despite locking her up, he continues dumping piles of government paperwork on her as if prison were just another office with worse lighting. One day, Michelle secretly sneaks into the dungeon using magic to avoid being seen. Elizabeth casually puts the guard to sleep with hypnosis, proving she could have escaped whenever she wanted. She asks Michelle whether the king or her father has finally decided to fix this misunderstanding. Instead, Michelle delivers another painful blow. Elizabeth's own father was the one who argued against helping her. Hearing that finally opens old wounds because he has always pushed difficult responsibilities onto her while avoiding them himself. As if that wasn't bad enough, Michelle reveals that Prince Friar has also started targeting Funnel Corporation. He has labeled it the company of a traitor and plans to replace all of Elizabeth's carefully chosen executives with his own clueless followers. Elizabeth immediately realizes this will destroy the company and hurt the kingdom's economy. Michelle can't understand why Elizabeth still worries about a kingdom that has treated her like a disposable tool. Elizabeth admits she's furious about being betrayed by Friar, framed by Sylvie, and abandoned by her own father. But she insists that none of it is the fault of the ordinary people, and she doesn't want innocent citizens to suffer because of their leaders' mistakes. Then Michelle shares one final piece of news. Prince Friar and his inner circle have been spreading false rumors that Elizabeth tried to assassinate Sylvie so she could seize control of the kingdom. They have absolutely no evidence, yet the public has started believing every word. The same people Elizabeth spent years helping are now insulting her without knowing the truth. That is the final straw. For the first time in her life, Elizabeth decides she's done sacrificing herself for people who never appreciated her. She slams her fist into the wall, finally letting out all the frustration she's bottled up for years. Then she thanks Michelle for helping her realize how foolish she's been. She could have escaped this prison at any moment. She simply chose not to. In this world, everyone possesses mana, but only a select few can summon powerful divine artifacts. These magical treasures can take many forms, from swords to spears. Elizabeth's divine artifact is far more impressive. It appears as 7 magical grimoires, and one of them allows her to record and recreate virtually any kind of magic. When she's finally ready to leave, Elizabeth creates an ice clone to remain in the prison so no one notices her escape right away. Then she secretly crosses the border and visits Viscount Lucas of the neighboring empire. Lucas still can't believe Prince Friar threw away someone as talented as Elizabeth. Anyone with half a brain could see she was the real reason the kingdom had prospered for years, and he often wished someone with her abilities worked for his empire instead. So when Elizabeth suddenly appears at his doorstep, Lucas can barely believe his eyes. She tells him she has had enough of being used and asks for asylum in the empire. Realizing this is an opportunity too good to refuse, Lucas gladly accepts her. He then asks what she plans to do next. Elizabeth gives him a calm smile before revealing her answer. She's going to tear down everything she spent years building for the kingdom that betrayed her. Elizabeth wasn't planning to charge straight into the kingdom with swords blazing. Her goal was much smarter than that. Since the empire and the kingdom were already destined to become enemies, she decided to work with the empire. But she had no intention of using them like disposable pawns. If they helped her destroy the kingdom, they would also benefit from everything she achieved. A fair trade for both sides. Thanks to Viscount Lucas's crest, the carriage passed through the kingdom's gates without anyone realizing Elizabeth was hiding inside. Lucas planned to take her to his territory near the kingdom's border, where he could keep an eye on her for a while. Elizabeth actually appreciated how quickly he acted. If they had waited any longer, even Lucas might not have been able to leave the kingdom safely. Curious, Lucas asked whether all of this was possible because of Elizabeth's divine artifact. She showed him her grimoire and claimed it could record every book she touched and every piece of information she saw or heard. Since she had spent years surrounded by the kingdom's political secrets, Lucas immediately wondered if she had military plans or confidential records stored inside it. Elizabeth guessed the royal castle was already in complete panic over her disappearance, so she had no problem sharing some information. After all, from her point of view, she was now a refugee. But here's the twist: there was no such thing as the Grimoire of Wisdom. Elizabeth's real divine artifact was actually the 7 grimoires. She simply revealed a tiny fraction of one of them, the Grimoire Lucifer, and both her father and the king completely bought the story. Talk about selling a lie with confidence. To thank Lucas for helping her, Elizabeth promised him a reward so enormous that the bounty for turning her in would look like pocket change. Once they reached Lucas's territory, she revealed her next move. She wanted to start a business and asked him to lend her 100 gold coins. To make him feel safe, she even drafted a magical contract. Within 1 year, she would repay double the amount. If she failed, she would willingly become his slave, giving him complete ownership over her. It sounded completely insane, but Elizabeth looked so confident that she practically acted like the mountain of gold was already sitting on his table. The building she picked for her company, however, looked like it had lost a fight with time. Even her maid, Mai, wondered if her lady had accidentally chosen an abandoned ruin instead of an office. When Elizabeth pushed the front door, it literally fell off its hinges. Well, at least the renovation had officially begun. After several days of cleaning and repairs, the building was finally ready. Elizabeth proudly named it the Trader Commercial Firm. Soon after, Mitty returned from town with a list of the empire's most influential nobles. Elizabeth realized they didn't have enough workers or equipment to mass-produce luxury cosmetics yet, so she decided to start with something everyone needed: soap. And not just any soap. This version was noticeably better than the soap already sold throughout the empire. It wasn't the final goal, but it was the perfect first step toward building a powerful company. Next, Elizabeth asked her maid to contact a few important people while she visited the Church of Libris to pray for the success of her new business. During her visit, 2 little boys burst inside, excitedly telling the priest they had earned lots of money that day before running off again. The priest explained that he also ran the orphanage next door, but keeping it open had become incredibly difficult. The children knew how hard he was struggling, so they had started pulling weeds around town and cleaning the military barracks just to help support the orphanage. The priest felt guilty for relying on them, but Elizabeth reassured him that the children were simply trying to repay his kindness. She then donated several gold coins. To her, this wasn't just charity, it was smart business. Every child would grow into a future customer someday, and supporting the people raising them was simply a long-term investment. That evening, Mitty returned with good news. She had successfully delivered free soap samples to the maids working in noble households. With sales starting the next day, Elizabeth's strategy was simple. Instead of selling to everyone, she would carefully choose her customers. The soap would cost just a little more than the competitors, making it feel like a premium product. Her real goal wasn't quick profit. It was making the Trader Commercial Firm a respected brand while quietly building relationships with the empire's most powerful families. And just like that, the first step of her revenge began. 3 months later, the plan was working perfectly. Soap sales kept climbing, and customers were now placing orders for toner, skin lotion, and shampoo as well. Even then, Elizabeth refused to flood the market. Every new customer was carefully investigated first, and if they passed her inspection, they were only allowed to buy limited quantities. Sometimes, making people wait is the fastest way to make them want your product even more. As usual, Elizabeth handed Mitty some money to donate to Father Louis and several local charities before the two of them headed out for a meal. While they ate, Elizabeth reminded Mitty to keep a close eye on their competitors and, most importantly, never let the soap formula leak. Right now, that recipe was the company's greatest weapon. Part of it was locked inside the firm's safe, while the rest was kept by Elizabeth herself. Unfortunately, someone at the next table had very sharp ears. The director had been losing customers month after month because the trader commercial firm kept stealing the spotlight. Even though Elizabeth only sold to a carefully selected group of buyers, those buyers happened to be the empire's most influential socialites. Their recommendations carried so much weight that anyone who openly attacked Trader Commercial risked making powerful nobles their enemies. A man named Grants secretly listened to their conversation before reporting everything to the director of a rival company. When Grants revealed where the soap formula was supposedly stored, the director thought he had hit the jackpot. He paid Grants for the information, told him to disappear for a while, and immediately began plotting. His plan wasn't just to copy the soap. He also wanted to claim he had obtained genuine trader's soap through secret channels and sell it for several times the original price. Talk about turning theft into a business strategy. A few days later, Elizabeth received a report from the kingdom's capital. Sylvia had officially become engaged to Prince Frey, and Elizabeth herself had been declared a traitor. She knew exactly who was behind it: her own father. Duke Leiston cared more about protecting the royal family than protecting his own daughter. As long as Elizabeth remained free, he was willing to sacrifice her reputation to preserve the crown prince's honor. The news filled Elizabeth with anger, but she refused to lose focus. Her revenge was already underway, and when the time finally came, she intended to leave the kingdom with nothing but regrets. Before she could dwell on it any longer, the office doors suddenly burst open. Art Hildegarde from the Merchants Guild's legal department marched inside with several officials. They had come to arrest Elizabeth after receiving reports that Trader Commercial was selling poisonous soap that had left customers with painful burns and sores. At the guild headquarters, Elizabeth calmly presented her records. Her documents showed that her soap contained nothing dangerous, and more importantly, the supposed victims had never even bought products from her company. When Art examined the suspicious soap, it certainly looked like Trader's soap at first glance, but the poor craftsmanship immediately gave it away. Elizabeth quickly realized what had happened. Someone had stolen part of the recipe and tried to recreate it. Luckily for her, the thieves had made one fatal mistake. The complete formula had never been stored in one place. Half of it remained locked inside the company's safe, while Elizabeth carried the other half herself. Anyone using only the stolen portion would end up creating a dangerous product instead of the real thing. It was the perfect trap for anyone foolish enough to steal it. Elizabeth then asked Art to question the victims about where they had actually purchased the fake soap. After hearing the evidence, Art realized that Trader Commercial wasn't the criminal, it was the victim. She apologized to Elizabeth and immediately went after the real culprit. Soon afterward, the rival company's director, Gazaru Jackman, was brought before the guild. Elizabeth demanded compensation for stealing her formula, damaging her company's reputation, and selling dangerous counterfeit products. Gazaru admitted everything but smugly refused to pay. According to him, the Merchants Guild had no authority to force compensation. He mocked Elizabeth, saying her only option was to ask a judge from the Church of Libris, and he doubted anyone would take the complaints of a young girl seriously. Unfortunately for Gazaru, his confidence didn't last very long. Father Louis was already standing in the room. Speaking in the name of the church, Father Louis ordered Gazaru to make amends for his crimes. Elizabeth didn't waste the opportunity. Instead of asking for a simple payment, she demanded everything Gazaru Commercial's management rights, his personal assets, and every piece of equipment, material, and staff belonging to the company. Safe to say, Gazaru's business career ended faster than he expected. One moment he was trying to steal Elizabeth's success, and the next he was handing over his entire company. That's one expensive bar of soap. Artie then walks in and apologizes to Ellie for all the trouble they caused, but Ellie quickly shuts down her guilt. She tells Artie none of it was her fault, the real villains were the Merchants Guild. Feeling relieved, Artie reveals one last secret. The man who convinced Gazaru to steal the soap formula was none other than Grant Carlton, Gazaru Commercial's bookkeeper. She suspected him all along but never had enough proof to confront him. Ellie isn't surprised. Now that Trader Commercial has taken over Gazaru's company, Grant technically works for her. She asks Artie to leave the rest to her. Moments later, Grant enters the room, already knowing he's about to be questioned. Instead of giving him a lecture, Ellie hands him a bag full of money. Grant is completely confused and says the reward is far too generous, but Ellie isn't finished yet. She also promotes him to Treyer's leadership team and promises to tell the Merchants Guild that the matter is settled because he has shown genuine remorse. Grant can hardly believe his luck and gratefully accepts. Of course, Ellie didn't do this out of pure kindness. Grant was one of the people she secretly recruited through Muriel. After investigating Gazaru's shady business, Ellie realized she needed someone on the inside to push him into stealing the soap formula and expose all of his crimes. Now that the plan has worked perfectly, Grant reminds Ellie about the promise she made before everything started. Grant takes Ellie to his home, where his wife is praying beside their sick daughter. She asks where he has been, terrified that their daughter is getting worse. Ellie introduces herself and explains that Grant only worked for her to save his little girl, so she hopes his wife can forgive him. Grant sadly explains that his daughter was hit by a carriage. They spent every coin they had on healing potions, but the doctors said nothing could save her. Ellie calmly says she can heal the girl herself. Grant is completely confused because Ellie isn't supposed to know healing magic. Thinking fast, she lies and says she's using a special magic item that boosts magical power. The truth is much bigger. Her divine artifact, the grimoire of Beelzebub, can copy powerful spells, including healing magic recorded from the kingdom's archbishop. Keeping that secret, Ellie casts Heal, and a warm green light surrounds the little girl. A few moments later, she slowly opens her eyes, as if she just woke up from a long nap. Grant and his wife are overwhelmed with gratitude after Ellie saves their daughter. Ellie tells them she only fulfilled her side of the deal and asks them to keep her healing ability a secret, claiming she can only use it on rare occasions. In reality, she's hiding the power of her divine artifact. With the Gazaru affair finally over, Treyer Commercial keeps growing. The company secures a major delivery route and gains loyal customers. Lucas is amazed that Ellie turned just 100 gold coins into a thriving business empire. Trusting her completely, he grants her permission to operate anywhere in the capital and across the empire, despite knowing the kingdom is searching for her. Ellie thanks him, tells Maria to make good use of their new travel rights, and sends Muriel to strengthen their relationship with the Church of Libras. Lunoa later arrives with documents from the capital. Ellie praises her progress, but Lunoa insists she still has much to learn. After surviving the carriage accident, Lunoa awakens a rare skill called Item Analyze, allowing her to instantly assess items. Recognizing how valuable the skill is for a merchant, Ellie keeps Lunoa as her student and begins teaching her magic. As preparations for the capital begin, Ellie uses another divine artifact, the Grimoire of Belger, which allows her to make contracts with otherworldly beings. After offering a silver coin, she summons white birds and sends them to gather her trusted allies. Over the next 6 months, Treyer Commercial expands rapidly by acquiring multiple companies. Before leaving for the capital, Ellie appoints Grant as deputy director and Stua as his assistant, confident they can manage the business in her absence. Since Noble Society's social season is approaching, Ellie tells Lunoa to study hard because she isn't ready to face high society yet. During their journey, Ellie notices the road has become rough and immediately warns everyone that poorly maintained roads usually mean bandits are nearby. Moments later, an arrow flies toward Lunoa, but Ellie quickly pulls her out of danger. She steps out alone to face the bandits. After silently freezing one attacker with ice magic, she shocks the rest by defeating 3 more with nothing but her sword. The final bandit begs for mercy, claiming poverty and heavy taxes forced him into crime. Ellie remains unmoved, saying that regardless of his reasons, he still preyed on innocent travelers. She executes him without hesitation and tells the shocked Lunoa that, to a merchant, bandits are no different from goblins or orcs, they're simply threats that must be eliminated. Ellie explains to Lunoa that bandits don't just steal money from merchants, they steal lives too. If you spare them, they'll simply attack the next innocent traveler. That's why the rule is simple. When you meet bandits, you take them down. As harsh as it sounds, it's the safest choice for everyone else. As the group continues toward the capital, Mira spots a woman asking for a ride. Ellie notices she's wearing church robes and immediately stops the carriage. The traveler gratefully introduces herself as Tita, a walking nun. She explains that walking nuns travel from village to village as part of their training, healing people for free with magic. Since many remote villages have no doctors, they're highly respected. Lunoa is amazed they never charge for their services, and after a few introductions, Tita joins the journey. Along the way, Lunoa asks how Ellie knew bandits would appear. Ellie explains that the rough, poorly maintained road was the giveaway. Good rulers invest in roads because better roads mean smoother trade, more merchants, higher tax income, and a stronger economy. When roads fall apart, it's usually because the local lord is neglecting his duties. Ellie then quizzes Lunoa on what happens when roads are neglected. Lunoa correctly says trade slows and villages lose access to supplies. Tita adds that food and medicine also become more expensive in cities because transportation costs rise, hurting the entire economy. Ellie is surprised by Tita's knowledge and explains that poor roads also drive struggling farmers into banditry while forcing merchants to hire guards, making goods even more expensive. In the end, ordinary people suffer because of short-sighted rulers. Their discussion is interrupted when Muriel reports another bandit ambush. Ellie tells Muriel to protect Lunoa and Tita while she fights, but Tita insists on joining the battle. Assuming a nun wouldn't kill anyone, Ellie simply knocks out a bandit with one punch. However, when she turns around, she's shocked to find Tita has already crushed a bandit's head without hesitation. Tita cheerfully asks why Ellie hasn't finished hers yet and jokingly calls her the kind-hearted one. Ellie quickly denies that accusation, but Tita misunderstands anyway. She assumes Ellie was only holding back because a nun was watching and apologizes for making things awkward. Then she calmly says that leaving bandits alive only creates more victims, so she'll finish Ellie's job as well. Just as Tita raises her weapon, the unconscious bandit wakes up and desperately begs for mercy. Tita smiles and says that while the Lord is merciful and sinners can be forgiven, bandits don't count as people in her eyes. Therefore, they don't deserve that mercy. And with that, she finishes him off without blinking. Watching the entire scene unfold, Ellie quietly realizes she may need to completely rethink everything she believed about church women. Tita then proudly shows Ellie a gold tooth she pulled from one of the bandits, happily explaining they can sell it for a nice profit. Ellie sighs and tells her to wash the blood off first before Lunoa sees her and gets traumatized. Meanwhile, at the royal mansion, Prince Fred argues with his butler over his plan to hand out free meals in the slums. The butler explains that using the kingdom's treasury for charity without a long-term plan will only bankrupt the nation. He reminds Fred that Elizabeth also fed the poor, but she paid with her own money and, more importantly, created jobs so people could become self-sufficient. Realizing he has no counterargument, Fred angrily cancels the project and storms off, leaving the butler wishing Elizabeth were still around. Later, the group relaxes at an inn, where Tita is happily drinking non-stop. She reveals she already sold all the loot and even offers to split the profits with Ellie, but Ellie tells her to keep it. Tita excitedly tries to hug her, only to be pushed away because her nose is running. Watching them, Lunoa tells Maria that Ellie finally looks happy. Maria agrees, saying Ellie used to shoulder everything alone and rarely smiled, so seeing her enjoy herself with friends makes her genuinely happy. Elsewhere, Fred vents to Sylvia that dealing with stubborn nobles has worn him out, adding that being with her helps him relax. As Sylvia thanks him, a mysterious figure secretly watching from behind a pillar remarks that having all your hard work ruined by a fool must be a miserable feeling. After arriving in the capital, Ellie, Meyer, and Luno check into a luxurious inn while they look for a permanent place to live. Luno is shocked by how expensive and fancy the rooms are and suggests staying somewhere cheaper instead. However, Ellie explains that appearances matter. Since they plan to start a business in the capital, staying in a low-end inn could make people underestimate them before they even open their doors. Not long after settling in, a man named Arnold arrives. Luno has never met him before, so Meyer explains that he used to help manage Ellie's business back in the kingdom. Arnold proves why Ellie trusts him so much when he reveals that he has already prepared several properties for her to inspect, despite not even knowing exactly when she would arrive. The next morning, Arnold takes Ellie to view several locations. After choosing a mansion for her residence, he shows her a workshop that would be perfect for her business. The only problem is that it costs a little more than she planned to spend. Still, Ellie decides it is too good an opportunity to pass up and buys it on the spot. Arnold also recommends renovating the workshop, and Ellie happily leaves the entire project in his capable hands. With their future home and business property secured, Arnold promises everything will be ready within a few days, meaning the group must continue staying at the inn for now. Later, Meyer brings up the idea of hiring more staff. At first, Ellie assumes she means employees for the business, but Meyer actually wants to hire another personal maid. Once the company starts growing, it will be difficult for Muriel to stay by Ellie's side all the time. Ellie suggests recruiting through the Merchant Guild, but Meyer points out a major problem. Ellie is still secretly a refugee. Hiring the wrong person could expose that secret and cause serious trouble. To avoid that risk, Meyer recommends buying a slave, since magical seals prevent slaves from disobeying their masters. There are criminal slaves and debt slaves, but Ellie is not particularly concerned about which type she gets. She simply needs a reliable attendant. The following day, they visit a slave market, but the experience is far from pleasant. The slaves there are thin, weak, and clearly mistreated. Luno is especially disturbed by what she sees. Ellie understands her feelings and gently tells her that she does not have to become comfortable with it, but she does need to understand the reality of the world they live in. Deciding to look elsewhere, they visit another slave trader and are immediately surprised by the difference. Instead of a gloomy atmosphere, they are greeted by a cheerful young slave sweeping outside who looks happier than some office workers on a Monday morning. The boy welcomes them to the Cedric commercial firm and escorts them inside. Ellie recognizes the name immediately. Cedric is famous throughout the Empire and is known as the Educator. One of the powerful members of the Imperial Merchant Guild Council, he supplies slaves to the Imperial Court and has built a reputation unlike any other slave trader. When the group finally meets him, Cedric casually reveals that he already knows all about Ellie and her company. Ellie is not buying the innocent act for a second. A merchant of his status would hardly keep tabs on a small business unless he already knew who she really was. Realizing Cedric likely knows she is a refugee, Ellie decides to stay cautious around him. Even so, she explains that she is looking for a capable attendant who can handle daily tasks and travel frequently between domains. Cedric immediately claims he has the perfect candidate and sends for a girl named Misha. As he leads them through the building, Ellie notices something completely unexpected: two slaves sitting in a classroom and learning mathematics. When she asks about it, Cedric proudly explains that all of his slaves receive an education. Depending on their talents, they may also study martial arts, cooking, or other specialized skills. Compared to the miserable conditions at the previous market, Cedric's operation feels less like a slave trader's business and more like a strange boarding school with a very questionable admissions policy. Ellie cannot help but be impressed by how different it is from anything she has seen before. Cedric explains that most slave dealers cut corners to maximize profits. They spend as little as possible on food, training, and care, which is why their slaves are often weak and unhealthy. Cedric, however, follows a completely different philosophy. He invests in every slave, making sure they are well-fed, educated, and properly trained. Naturally, that means his slaves cost more, but Ellie believes the higher price is more than justified. Soon, they are introduced to Misha. Cedric mentions that this is her first time meeting potential buyers, so she is understandably nervous. He also explains that her race is naturally athletic, making her perfect for frequent travel, although she is not exactly bodyguard material. Ellie is satisfied with what she sees and decides to hire Misha immediately. To complete the contract, she places her hand on the slave crest, while Cedric casts the spell that officially transfers Misha's ownership. Before sending her off, Cedric tells Misha to serve Ellie faithfully. Misha gratefully thanks him for everything he has done for her, and Cedric wishes her the best of luck as she begins her new life. The following day, Misha officially starts working as Ellie's personal attendant. One of her first responsibilities is organizing Ellie's packed schedule. She carefully lists everything on the agenda, including inspecting the workshop renovations in the morning, followed by 2 business meetings and a sales negotiation in the afternoon. Ellie appreciates her hard work but gently points out one small mistake. Next time, she should also mention who the meetings are with. Otherwise, Ellie might walk into the wrong room and accidentally negotiate with the wallpaper. Misha quickly apologizes, but Ellie simply smiles and reminds her that everyone makes mistakes when learning a new job. Right now, Ellie's biggest priority is introducing her newest cosmetic product, lip gloss, to the capital's nobles. Later that day, she attends a party hosted by Baroness Melanie. The moment Melanie spots Ellie, she excitedly calls over all of her noble friends and proudly introduces Ellie as the genius behind the cosmetics she has been using. The ladies instantly become interested because they have already seen the impressive results for themselves. Naturally, they all want to know where they can buy the products. Ellie explains that she will soon open a store in the capital, but access will be limited to members because her production is supposedly limited. To thank Melanie for introducing everyone, Ellie promises that all of her friends will receive priority memberships when the store opens. The noble ladies are thrilled. In reality, Ellie is creating artificial scarcity. Even though she can produce plenty of cosmetics, she pretends supplies are limited, turning her makeup into an exclusive status symbol. Since Melanie secured everyone early access, the nobles now owe her a favor, strengthening Ellie's relationship with one of the capital's most influential women. Ellie then unveils her new lip gloss, and Melanie instantly loves it. The other noble ladies want one as well, but Ellie tells them they can buy it after her store officially opens, guaranteeing a crowd of eager customers on opening day. After the party, Ellie and Meyer hear a commotion from a nearby alley. They discover Tita surrounded by angry gamblers accusing her of cheating them out of their money. Tita refuses to pay them back, claiming they have no proof. When the men attack, she defeats most of them herself, while Ellie knocks out the last one with a single ice bullet. As Ellie checks if she's alright, Tita accidentally admits she really was cheating. Ellie starts scolding her for gambling after promising to stay out of trouble, but Tita quickly makes up an excuse and runs away before the lecture can continue. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom, things are falling apart behind the scenes. Ellie's father summons Rosaria because the government's internal affairs have become a complete mess ever since Elizabeth disappeared. Rosaria is not surprised. Elizabeth had been quietly keeping everything running, and without her, the cracks are impossible to ignore. The prince is far too incompetent to handle the job, while Ellie's father is already overwhelmed dealing with foreign affairs. Left with no better option, he asks Rosaria to take over Elizabeth's former responsibilities. Rosaria immediately realizes he is essentially asking her to become the next Elizabeth. She has little choice but to accept because refusing would almost certainly earn her the label of traitor. Back in the Empire, Ellie enjoys a relaxed coffee with Lucas. He tells her that the Emperor recently summoned him for a personal report. Although Lucas had already informed the Emperor about Ellie before, the Emperor wanted to hear everything directly from him. Curious, Ellie asks what the Emperor thinks of her. Lucas explains that, for now, the Emperor has ordered him to simply keep watching her. Since every business venture Ellie has started has benefited the Empire, the Emperor has no reason to interfere yet. However, he still does not fully trust her. Ellie is relieved to hear that because the last thing she needs is the Emperor barging into her business plans. With that obstacle temporarily out of the way, she confidently promises Lucas that he will have a front row seat when the kingdom finally suffers the consequences of driving her away. Subscribe to not miss the next part and watch the next video on screen.
Go ahead. Shawty, give me a reason.